The opens with the young woman, Clara, preparing for the journey that will change her life. She lives in a small, rural town in the eastern United States, a place where opportunities are scarce and her prospects for independence are limited. Clara has been corresponding for months with a man she met through a mail-order marriage service. His letters are filled with promises of a secure home, a prosperous life, and companionship on the frontier. Her heart swells with hope and a sense of adventure. Though there is a quiet apprehension in her mind, she has never traveled this far alone, and the frontier is a world unknown to her. Clara's preparations are modest. She packs the few belongings she can carry: a small trunk with a couple of dresses, a worn shawl, a set of letters from her soon-to-be husband, and a tiny satchel of personal keepsakes. She is acutely aware that she must leave her familiar world behind, the comfort of her family, the predictable rhythm of her town, and the safety of home. Her decision is fueled by a combination of hope and desperation. She dreams of independence, a chance to prove herself, and perhaps even a life filled with love, yet she cannot ignore the risks she faces. The narrative then follows her as she boards a stagecoach that will carry her toward the frontier town where she is to meet her husband. The journey is long and uncomfortable. The roads are rough, the winds bite at her exposed skin, and the creaking of the coach and the rhythmic clatter of hooves create a tense, uneasy atmosphere. Clara reflects on the letters she has received, imagining the life awaiting her: a cozy cabin, fertile land, and a man who will cherish her. The optimism in her heart is tempered by a subtle, knowing fear. She knows little of the man she is to marry beyond his letters, and there is no guarantee that the reality will match her dreams. During the journey, the harshness of the frontier begins to reveal itself. The coach stops at small, isolated stations where travelers exchange news and provisions. Clara meets other passengers who share stories of hardship, survival, and even tragedy in the vast, untamed West. Their tales are both frightening and exhilarating, painting a picture of a world that is as dangerous as it is beautiful. Snow begins to fall in delicate flakes, signaling the severity of the approaching winter. Clara shivers under her thin cloak, realizing that the comforts of home warmth, food, companionship will be scarce once she arrives. Despite the growing unease, Clara's determination pushes her forward. She clings to the hope that her journey, however perilous, is a necessary step toward a new life. She watches the landscape change from rolling hills to dense forests and icy plains, marveling at the raw beauty of the untamed land. The narrative emphasizes Clara's courage, her vulnerability, and the tension between hope and fear. She is at a crossroads, leaving behind the known and stepping into uncertainty, driven by the promise of love and survival. It concludes as Clara nears the outskirts of the remote frontier town. The snow intensifies, the cold grows sharper, and the first hints of isolation begin to settle in. The stagecoach's wheels struggle through the icy terrain, mirroring the difficulties Clara will soon face. At this moment, the story establishes the central themes of survival, resilience, and the fragile balance between hope and despair. Clara's journey is not just physical, it is emotional and psychological, a test of her courage, determination, and ability to navigate a world that is at once beautiful and perilous. Begins as Clara finally arrives at the remote frontier town, her heart full of anticipation and anxiety. The small settlement is quiet, almost eerily so, its streets blanketed in fresh snow. She expects to find her mail-order husband waiting, perhaps with a warm smile, a welcoming home, and a promise of a new life. Instead, she finds emptiness. No carriage awaits her, no familiar figure greets her. The town seems almost deserted, with only the occasional townsfolk bustling about, their faces hard from the cold and their eyes wary of strangers. Clara feels a chill deeper than the winter air. It is the sting of betrayal, the unsettling realization that the person she trusted to meet her may not come at all. As she steps onto the snow-covered path outside the town, the weather begins to worsen. A sudden wind rises, carrying sharp, icy flakes that sting her cheeks and seep through her thin cloak. Clara's excitement is replaced by fear. She struggles to keep her balance as the snow drifts grow taller and the path ahead becomes nearly indistinguishable from the surrounding wilderness. Her breath forms clouds in the freezing air, and each step feels heavier than the last. She realizes with growing panic that she is utterly unprepared for the brutal cold. Her shoes, ordinary and thin, are quickly soaked and useless against the icy ground, and her hands, fingers stiffening from exposure, can no longer grasp her belongings securely. The narrative emphasizes Clara's isolation. She calls out for help, her voice swallowed by the howling wind. There is no answer. The townspeople she had glimpsed earlier retreat into their homes, leaving her alone against the growing storm. Panic begins to set in as the snow thickens and visibility drops. The once hopeful dream of meeting her husband fades into a desperate struggle for survival. Clara's mind races with fear and disbelief, struggling to comprehend the cruel twist of fate that left her stranded in the wilderness. She is not only abandoned physically but emotionally. The betrayal cuts deep, and her sense of trust in others falters. Clara attempts to find shelter, but the frontier town offers little. Doors are locked, and the innkeepers are either unwilling or too busy to assist a stranger. Each step she takes sinks her deeper into snow, and her body begins to betray her. Her legs tremble, her lips turn blue, and the warmth she relied on is rapidly slipping away. The storm intensifies, whipping around her in vicious gusts that disorient and frighten her. She stumbles over hidden rocks and ice, her trunk falling open, scattering her few possessions into the snow. Desperation and helplessness weigh on her, amplifying her fear and the cold. Amid the terror, Clara reflects on her decision to journey alone. Her initial courage now feels naive against the merciless wilderness. She remembers the letters from her husband, the promises, the dreams, and feels the bitter sting of being deceived. This emotional turmoil combining fear, betrayal, and isolation sets the stage for the arrival of her unexpected savior. The narrative builds tension through the relentless storm and Clara's worsening physical state, highlighting the fragility of human survival in the harsh frontier. By the end of, Clara is at the brink of collapse, her strength failing and hope nearly extinguished. The snowstorm represents both the literal danger of the wilderness and the emotional desolation she feels from being abandoned. She is utterly alone, vulnerable, and in desperate need of rescue. The stage is perfectly set for the dramatic entrance of the Lakota warrior, whose timely intervention will mark the turning point from despair to hope. The focus is on Clara's harrowing struggle to survive in the snowstorm, alone and unprepared, emphasizing both her physical suffering and emotional resilience. As the storm intensifies, the cold becomes nearly unbearable. Clara's thin cloak offers almost no protection, and her soaked shoes leave her feet numb and frostbitten. Each step she takes is agonizing, sinking deep into snowdrifts that slow her progress and sap her strength. The biting wind stings her exposed skin, and the howling gusts carry a haunting loneliness, amplifying her fear. She becomes acutely aware that without shelter or warmth, her survival is in immediate jeopardy. As Clara stumbles through the whitened landscape, the story delves into her internal thoughts and feelings. Panic and despair threaten to overwhelm her, yet beneath them lies a stubborn spark of determination. She recalls lessons from her childhood, how her mother had told her to stay calm in a crisis, to keep moving even when the odds seem impossible. These memories sustain her as she drags herself forward, the snow crunching painfully under her bare or thinly clad feet. Each breath is a visible reminder of the cold, the rapid rise and fall of her chest a rhythm against the storm. She shivers violently, trying to will warmth into her frozen limbs. Her physical condition deteriorates rapidly. Clara's hands, no longer protected, are stiff and swollen. Her fingers are difficult to move, making even small tasks, like adjusting her shawl or clutching her trunk, nearly impossible. Her legs ache with exhaustion, the muscles trembling as she trudges through uneven terrain. Every step feels like an uphill battle, both literal and figurative. The snowstorm obscures landmarks, leaving her disoriented, unable to determine which direction is safe. She fears wandering further into danger, potentially falling into hidden ravines or frozen streams. The wilderness around her is unforgiving, indifferent to her plight. In these moments of extreme vulnerability, Clara's mind begins to oscillate between fear and determination. She imagines succumbing to the snow and cold, the terrifying possibility of never seeing another person again. Yet she also clings to hope, the faint belief that anyone might find her. She recalls the letters of her mail-order husband, now a bitter reminder of trust betrayed, yet they also serve as a faint tether to the human connection she desperately craves. This tension between despair and hope creates a vivid emotional landscape, drawing the reader into her struggle. Clara's survival instincts start to take over. She searches for natural shelters. The hollow of a tree, a rock outcropping, or even a small dip in the snow that might provide some protection against the wind. She huddles, trying to conserve body heat, wrapping her thin shawl tightly around her trembling frame. She recalls stories she has heard of travelers lost in the wilderness and tries to emulate the strategies they used, keeping moving to generate warmth, avoiding lying flat in the snow, and protecting her core body temperature at all costs. Every action is a calculated fight against nature itself. As the storm rages on, exhaustion begins to blur Clara's perception. Snowflakes cling to her eyelashes, her vision becomes blurred, and her movements slow. The narrative highlights the danger of hypothermia, her teeth chatter uncontrollably, her limbs grow heavy, and sleep threatens to overtake her in the most dangerous way. Her mind drifts in and out of awareness, blending memories, fears, and the dream of being saved. The relentless storm mirrors her internal struggle, chaotic, overwhelming, and merciless. It closes at the peak of Clara's vulnerability. She is nearly frozen, lost in a vast white wilderness, and on the edge of despair. Yet within this despair lies the seed of hope, the anticipation of rescue, which will come in the form of the Lakota warrior. Her desperate survival sets the stage for his entrance, making her subsequent salvation feel miraculous and earned. This section emphasizes resilience, human fragility, and the thin line between life and death on the frontier. Begins at the critical moment when Clara, exhausted and nearly succumbing to the snowstorm, is discovered by a Lakota warrior. The narrative shifts to introduce the warrior, whose presence contrasts sharply with the desolation and chaos surrounding Clara. He is portrayed as a figure of strength, calm, and experience, someone intimately familiar with the harsh winter landscape and capable of reading the subtle signs of danger. As he scouts the snow-covered plains, his keen eyes catch the small, trembling figure huddled against the wind. The initial interaction is cautious and tense. Clara, disoriented and fearful from her ordeal, is unsure whether this man is friend or threat. She flinches instinctively as he approaches, clutching her shawl tightly around her shoulders. The warrior, sensing her fear, maintains a gentle, respectful distance. His demeanor conveys calm authority and reassurance. He speaks softly, his words carrying warmth and clarity, cutting through the howling wind. The story emphasizes that, in this moment, trust must be earned, not demanded. Clara's instinct is to retreat, but her physical weakness makes flight impossible, forcing her to confront the unknown and accept help. The Lakota warrior immediately assesses her condition. He notices her frostbitten fingers, pale complexion, and trembling body. His first act of compassion is practical. He wraps his warm, fur-lined cloak around her fragile frame, providing immediate protection against the biting cold. The cloak symbolizes both physical safety and emotional comfort, enveloping her in a shield against the storm. Clara feels the heat seep back into her frozen body, and for the first time since her abandonment, she experiences a sense of relief and security. This simple gesture establishes the foundation of trust and connection that will develop between them. The narrative also explores Clara's emotional response. Relief is intertwined with awe and gratitude. She recognizes that this warrior, a stranger, is risking the harsh elements to save her life. Her mind, still fogged by the cold, begins to process the reality of being rescued. The psychological impact of this moment is profound. She moves from hopelessness and despair to the fragile glimmer of hope. The storm continues to rage, yet within the protective cocoon of the warrior's cloak, she feels a tentative sense of safety. The story emphasizes the warrior's expertise and decisiveness. He guides Clara carefully through the treacherous terrain, pointing out hazards hidden beneath the snow and adjusting her steps to avoid injury. He maintains a steady pace, ensuring that her weakened body is not overexerted. His knowledge of the land, the hidden trails, safe shelters, and natural windbreaks becomes Clara's lifeline. Every step forward is a lesson in survival and a demonstration of his skill, reinforcing the narrative theme of human reliance on experience and empathy in the face of nature's dangers. Throughout this section, the emotional connection between Clara and the warrior is subtle but powerful. They share no lengthy dialogue yet communicate through actions, gestures, and mutual understanding. Clara begins to It focuses on the gradual development of trust between Clara and the Lakota warrior, emphasizing the emotional and psychological dimensions of their growing bond. After being rescued from the snowstorm, Clara is still physically weak and emotionally shaken. Her initial relief is tempered by lingering fear and distrust. She has been betrayed, once abandoned by the man she traveled so far to meet, and the memory of that betrayal makes it difficult for her to fully rely on another stranger, even one who has saved her life. The narrative explores her vulnerability and cautious optimism as she navigates this new relationship. The warrior, aware of her fragile state, demonstrates patience and respect. He does not force conversation or actions, understanding that trust cannot be hurried. Instead, he performs small acts of care, offering her warm water to drink, checking her injuries, and adjusting his cloak to ensure she remains protected from the cold. Each act is deliberate and understated, highlighting his empathy and attentiveness. For Clara, these gestures are profoundly comforting. They signal safety, reliability, and the absence of malice. Gradually, she begins to lower her guard, tentatively allowing herself to depend on him for guidance and protection. Their journey together through the snowy terrain further facilitates the building of trust. The warrior leads her carefully, pointing out safe paths and hidden dangers beneath the snow. He instructs her gently on how to navigate the harsh environment, teaching her techniques to conserve energy and maintain warmth. Clara, initially hesitant, begins to follow his advice and recognizes the wisdom in his knowledge. Each successful step forward reinforces her sense of safety and her belief in his capability. The dynamic between them starts to shift from rescuer and rescued to a cooperative partnership, grounded in mutual respect. The trust-building process is also emotional. As they travel, Clara begins to share fragments of her story, her journey as a mail-order bride, the betrayal she experienced, and the fears she harbors about the future. She speaks cautiously, testing the warrior's reaction. He listens without judgment, responding with empathy and patience rather than unsolicited advice or criticism. This non-judgmental acceptance is transformative for Clara, who has felt isolated and vulnerable for so long. She experiences, for the first time since her abandonment, the reassurance that her feelings and experiences matter and are acknowledged. The warrior, too, demonstrates his own openness in subtle ways. He explains aspects of his life, his role in the Lakota community, and his intimate knowledge of the land. While he does not overwhelm her with information, these insights provide Clara with context. helping her understand the world she has stepped into. This exchange fosters a sense of connection and mutual respect, illustrating that trust is not one-sided. It grows when both parties engage with honesty and vulnerability. By the end of Clara's initial fear and hesitation have begun to transform into cautious confidence. She still remains aware of her vulnerability, but she now perceives the warrior as a reliable companion rather than a mere savior. The storm may still rage around them, but within the small sphere of shared survival, trust has begun to root itself. Clara experiences a shift from passive fear to active reliance, understanding that cooperation and mutual support are essential for survival in this harsh environment. This part emphasizes the emotional depth of their bond, laying the foundation for the story's later themes of love and belonging. The careful, incremental development of trust highlights the human need for connection, especially in moments of extreme vulnerability. The warrior's patience and Clara's willingness to open herself, even just slightly, signal the beginning of a relationship that will evolve into profound emotional and eventually romantic intimacy. Follows Clara and the Lakota warrior as they navigate the perilous terrain toward shelter, highlighting the growing trust and interdependence between them. The snowstorm, though slightly less intense than before, still blankets the landscape in a thick, disorienting white. Visibility is limited, and each step forward requires care and attention. The journey itself becomes a test of resilience, resourcefulness, and cooperation, emphasizing the harsh realities of the frontier while simultaneously deepening the emotional connection between Clara and her rescuer. Clara, still weak and unaccustomed to the wilderness, relies heavily on the warrior's guidance. He points out hidden dangers beneath the snow, frozen streams, deep drifts, and thin ice that could break underfoot. At times, he takes her hand to steady her or gently guides her through treacherous patches, his movements deliberate and protective. For Clara, these small actions are not just practical, they are profoundly reassuring, reinforcing the sense of safety that has begun to replace her earlier fear. She begins to recognize that the warrior's strength and knowledge are matched by his patience and respect for her pace. The narrative also focuses on Clara's internal experience. With each step, she becomes more aware of her dependence on another human being and the importance of mutual trust. She recalls the betrayal of her mail-order husband and contrasts it with the steady, unselfish care of the warrior. The contrast heightens her gratitude and slowly nurtures feelings of admiration and affection. She begins to notice subtle details, the way he moves with confidence across the snow, the quiet authority in his voice, and the calm assurance with which he handles the dangers of the wilderness. These observations deepen her sense of connection and reinforce the growing emotional bond between them. The journey also allows the story to explore the physical and psychological challenges of surviving in the harsh winter landscape. Clara's body continues to struggle against exhaustion, frostbite, and cold, yet the warrior's presence provides both literal and metaphorical warmth. He teaches her survival skills along the way, such as how to conserve energy, recognize safe pathways, and protect herself from exposure. These lessons are vital not only for her physical survival, but also for her sense of empowerment. Slowly, she transforms from a passive victim of circumstance into an active participant in her own survival, guided but not overshadowed by the warrior. Along the way, the warrior demonstrates cultural knowledge and wisdom. He explains aspects of the land, the behavior of animals, the location of safe water sources, and the natural features that can serve as temporary shelter. These insights provide Clara with a deeper understanding of the frontier world, fostering respect for both the environment and the people who navigate it successfully. The cultural exchange begins subtly here, laying the groundwork for more profound understanding and acceptance later in the story. As they progress, Clara and the warrior face several natural obstacles, each reinforcing their interdependence. A steep, snow-covered incline challenges her strength, and the warrior offers his arm for support, guiding her safely to the top. They cross a partially frozen creek where he carefully tests the ice before signaling her to follow. Each successful passage strengthens Clara's confidence and her trust in him, reinforcing the theme that survival is not just about physical endurance, but also about collaboration and mutual reliance. It concludes as they finally approach a sheltered area, perhaps the edge of a forest, a hidden cave, or the outskirts of the warrior's village. Clara, exhausted but increasingly secure, begins to feel a cautious optimism. She has survived the storm, learned to rely on another human being, and begun to experience the emotional comfort that comes with safety and protection. The journey to shelter thus serves as both a literal that shifts the focus from physical survival to emotional and cultural immersion as Clara begins to experience life within the Lakota warrior's world. Having arrived at the edge of his village or temporary winter shelter, she is no longer battling the immediate threat of the snowstorm. Instead, she faces the subtler challenge of understanding a culture and way of life completely different from her own. This segment emphasizes learning, observation, and the gradual deepening of her emotional connection with the warrior while exploring themes of respect, curiosity, and adaptation. The narrative begins with Clara observing the warrior's community from a distance. She sees the routines, traditions, and social interactions that define the Lakota way of life. The community is tightly knit, with each member contributing to survival and mutual support, a stark contrast to the isolation she experienced on her journey and in her previous town. Clara notices the cooperative spirit, the respect for elders, and the reverence for nature embedded in daily life. She begins to understand that survival in this environment requires not only physical strength, but also social cohesion and harmony with the land. As she spends time with the warrior, he explains customs, rituals, and survival techniques. He teaches her how to gather firewood, start a fire in snowy conditions, and prepare basic meals using the resources available in the wilderness. Each lesson is practical, but it also carries cultural significance, providing Clara with insights into the values and traditions of the Lakota people. Through these interactions, she develops respect for the wisdom embedded in their way of life, and she begins to see her own assumptions and prejudices challenged. Clara also participates in daily routines, from fetching water to helping with small domestic tasks, gradually gaining a sense of agency and belonging. The warrior guides her with patience, never criticizing her mistakes but encouraging learning through experience. This nurturing approach strengthens the bond between them, as Clara comes to rely on him not only for physical protection but also for emotional support and mentorship. Their interactions are marked by mutual respect. She is receptive and eager to learn, and he treats her as an equal partner in the shared work of survival and adaptation. The cultural exchange extends beyond practical skills. The warrior shares stories of his ancestors, oral histories, and spiritual beliefs, giving Clara insight into a worldview that emphasizes connection to the land, respect for all living beings, and the importance of community. Through these stories, Clara gains a deeper appreciation for the harmony and resilience that underpin Lakota life. The narrative emphasizes that her survival is no longer solely dependent on her own resourcefulness or the warrior's intervention. It is now supported by the larger cultural and social framework in which she has been welcomed. Emotionally, Clara begins to feel a sense of belonging and acceptance. She contrasts this with her earlier experience of betrayal and isolation from the mail-order husband. The warmth, trust, and patience she encounters within the warrior's community provide a stark counterpoint to her previous fears. She starts to recognize that home is not only a physical place, but also a space of trust, care, and mutual respect. Her feelings toward the warrior deepen, moving from gratitude to admiration and subtly to a nascent emotional attachment. It also highlights Clara's internal transformation. She begins to shed some of the fear and skepticism that had dominated her journey. Through learning, observing, and participating, she develops resilience, confidence, and a growing sense of agency. The frontier, once alien and threatening, becomes a place of possibility, shaped by her growing understanding of its people and their ways. The narrative emphasizes that survival involves both external conditions, weather, terrain, shelter, and internal adaptation, trust, openness, and the willingness to learn from another culture. By the end of, Clara has begun to integrate into the warrior's world, not as a passive observer but as an engaged participant. The cultural exchange strengthens both her practical survival skills and her emotional resilience while deepening the connection between her and the warrior. This sets the stage for Part 8, where the story will explore the emotional turning point in their relationship and the beginnings of deeper affection and trust. Centers on Clara's emotional awakening as her experiences with the Lakota warrior and immersion in his world culminate in a profound turning point. Up to this moment, Clara's focus has been on physical survival, learning the ways of the land and gradually building trust with the warrior. Now, she begins to confront her own feelings, recognizing the depth of her gratitude, admiration, and burgeoning attachment to the man who saved her life. This segment explores the interplay between vulnerability, intimacy, and emotional courage, highlighting the transformative power of human connection. The scene opens with Clara reflecting on her journey and the choices that led her to this point. She remembers the long, lonely trek as a mail-order bride, the betrayal of her absent husband, and the terror of being stranded in a snowstorm with no shoes. These memories, once painful reminders of despair, now contrast sharply with the warmth, protection, and companionship she has found with the warrior. She begins to see her survival not merely as a physical feat, but as the result of trust, care, and the unexpected kindness of another human being. This realization deepens her emotional awareness, prompting her to consider the possibility of love. The emotional turning point is catalyzed by a quiet, intimate moment between Clara and the warrior. Perhaps they sit together by a fire in his lodge or a sheltered cabin, the storm raging outside but unable to touch the safe space they have created. He performs small acts of care, offering food, adjusting her cloak, or simply sitting beside her in companionable silence. These gestures, unhurried and attentive, communicate more than words ever could. Clara notices his unwavering patience, his attentiveness to her comfort, and the quiet strength that ensures she is never left in danger again. In this moment, she begins to trust not only his actions, but also his intentions, and her emotional walls start to lower. The narrative explores Clara's internal dialogue, highlighting her struggle between caution and desire. Her past experiences have taught her to be wary of men who promise love and security but fail to deliver. Yet with the warrior, she senses an authenticity that transcends words, actions grounded in respect, competence, and empathy. She begins to understand that love can emerge from mutual trust and shared experience, not just promises or letters. This realization marks a significant emotional shift, transforming her gratitude into admiration and then into affection. As the storm outside mirrors the turbulence of Clara's inner world, the narrative emphasizes the contrast between fear and safety, isolation and connection. The warrior's presence provides both physical warmth and emotional stability, creating a safe environment for Clara to explore her feelings. She begins to recognize that her heart, once closed and wary, is capable of hope and attachment. The emotional turning point is subtle yet profound. She is no longer a passive survivor of circumstance, but an active participant in the relationship forming around her. This section also introduces moments. The focus is on Clara's conscious choice to embrace a new life with the Lakota warrior, marking the culmination of her emotional and psychological journey. Up to this point, Clara has survived the storm, built trust, and experienced an emotional awakening. Now she must confront the reality of her circumstances and make a deliberate decision about her future. This section emphasizes agency, acceptance, and the conscious pursuit of belonging and love, illustrating the profound transformation she has undergone. The scene begins with Clara reflecting on her past life, the long journey as a mail-order bride, the heartbreak of betrayal, and the loneliness she endured on the snow-covered trail. Each memory highlights the stark contrast between what she left behind and what she has now discovered. The frontier, once a symbol of fear and danger, has become a place of possibility. She recognizes that the warrior has not only saved her physically, but has also guided her toward emotional and social security. This clarity of perspective allows her to confront her feelings without fear, acknowledging the bond that has grown between them. Clara's decision is framed through both introspection and action. She considers the life she once imagined with her absent husband, the promises he made, and the dreams that now feel hollow and unattainable. In contrast, she observes the warrior's steady presence, the warmth of his protection, and the authenticity of his care. She realizes that this new life offers safety, love, and a sense of belonging, things she had longed for but never truly received. The narrative emphasizes that Clara's choice is not simply about survival, but about seeking fulfillment, emotional security, and connection. The story explores her emotional reasoning. Clara acknowledges the fear and hesitation that linger from her past betrayals, but she recognizes that clinging to those old attachments would only perpetuate loneliness and vulnerability. She begins to trust her instincts, realizing that her heart knows the truth even before her mind fully articulates it. This self-awareness is crucial. Clara is no longer a passive figure swept along by circumstance. She is an active participant in shaping her destiny. Her acceptance is both pragmatic and deeply emotional, a recognition that the life she desires is not a distant dream but attainable in her current reality. The warrior, while quiet and unassuming, mirrors her readiness. He has demonstrated patience, empathy, and consistency throughout her journey. Clara perceives the depth of his commitment not through words alone, but through his actions, his willingness to protect her, guide her, and respect her autonomy. This realization reinforces her decision. The choice to stay is not just about physical survival, but about joining a partnership rooted in mutual respect, trust, and shared experience. Clara's decision is solidified through tangible actions. She expresses her desire to remain, to learn, and to fully integrate into the warrior's community. She participates in shared tasks with renewed purpose, contributes to daily routines, and begins to embrace the cultural practices that once seemed foreign. Each small act is a symbolic affirmation of her choice and acceptance. By actively engaging in her new life, Clara asserts control over her circumstances, demonstrating resilience and agency. The narrative emphasizes the emotional resolution of her journey. The pain of abandonment and the fear of isolation are replaced by hope, confidence, and the sense of belonging. Clara's acceptance is both inward and outward. She trusts herself, the warrior, and the new life she is choosing. She understands that love, safety, and purpose are intertwined, and that her happiness is now linked to shared experiences, trust, and connection rather than empty promises. It concludes with Clara standing fully in her decision, embracing the new life and the relationship that has grown from adversity and compassion. The stage is set for Part 10, the story's conclusion, where the narrative will celebrate survival, love, and the beginning of a future built on trust, courage, and shared hope. Serves as the resolution of Clara's journey, emphasizing renewal, survival, and the beginning of a life filled with trust, love, and belonging. Having faced betrayal, physical danger, and emotional vulnerability, Clara now steps into a future of her own making. This section focuses on the tangible and symbolic aspects of a new beginning, highlighting how courage, resilience, and human connection transform despair into hope. The story opens with Clara fully integrated into the warrior's world. She has learned the routines of the village, the skills needed to navigate the harsh frontier, and the customs that guide daily life. Her presence is no longer that of a fragile outsider, but of an active, contributing member of the community. She moves with confidence, her actions guided by both practical knowledge and the emotional security she has gained through her bond with the warrior. Each task she completes, whether gathering firewood, preparing a meal, or helping care for the younger members of the community, symbolizes her survival and adaptation. Emotionally, Clara is transformed. She has moved from fear and isolation to trust and attachment. The bond with the Lakota warrior has deepened into a subtle, profound love rooted in shared hardship, mutual respect, and compassion. Their relationship is portrayed not through grand declarations, but through everyday interactions. The way he ensures her comfort, the quiet guidance he offers, and the unspoken understanding between them. Clara's heart, once guarded and bruised by betrayal, now experiences the security of being valued, protected, and truly seen. This emotional foundation is the core of her new beginning. The narrative emphasizes the symbolic aspects of renewal. The winter storm that once threatened to claim Clara's life has passed, leaving a landscape both harsh and beautiful, mirroring her personal transformation. The snow-covered terrain now feels familiar, even comforting, representing the challenges she has overcome and the resilience she has cultivated. The cloak that once protected her against the storm becomes a symbol of the trust and bond she shares with the warrior, a tangible reminder of her survival and the emotional shelter he has provided. Clara also reflects on her past, but now with clarity and acceptance. The mail-order husband who abandoned her becomes a part of her history rather than an obstacle to her future. She acknowledges the pain and lessons of that betrayal, understanding how it shaped her courage, resilience, and ability to recognize genuine care and love. This reflective process reinforces the theme that adversity, while painful, can lead to growth and a deeper appreciation for meaningful human connections. The story culminates with a moment of shared triumph and hope. Clara and the warrior step outside together, surveying the snow-covered landscape with quiet satisfaction. Their companionship is evident in their gestures and expressions, a shared smile, a hand held for balance, or a glance that communicates understanding without words. They are partners in survival, in love, and in life, ready to face the challenges of the frontier together. The narrative emphasizes that a new beginning is not the absence of hardship, but the presence of trust, courage, and mutual support. The closes on a note of open-ended promise. Clara's journey, once fraught with danger and betrayal, now unfolds into a life rich with opportunity, connection, and hope. The frontier, which had